Hi, I'm Roby.
And I'm Marissa.
And we're here to talk to you today about your role with clients, specifically theory and application. So I've been with Cheers for 10 years. I'm currently a behavior therapist in the Community Support Services and Neurobehavioral Intervention program. I started as a residential facilitator at St. George's, and then I moved to the role of behavior therapist in Finch Residence, and then I moved to my current role.
And for myself, I've been with Cheers for 5 years. I actually started as a student, and then I started at Aldebrain as a residential facilitator, and then I came to Finch Residence and St. George's Residence as the behavior therapist.
So what you're going to get out of this training is you are going to be able to define the key elements of supports that are developed with the framework of positive behavioral intervention and support. You're going to be able to identify and apply 9 principles of intervention that integrate cognitive communication and behavior. And also you're going to be able to apply positive behavioral support framework by facilitating involvement, collaboration with clients in positive everyday routines, and develop in collaboration with clients positive plans and strategies. We know that with folks that have sustained an acquired brain injury, that often they have behavioral and cognitive problems post-injury. And we know that these challenges can develop in complex ways. And what the research has told us is that an integrated approach to intervention and supports works best. So looking at many of the traditional approaches to behavioral intervention and cognitive rehab, and including positive behavioral supports and the development of personally meaningful activities for program development with individuals with acquired brain injury, we are going to present to you today a framework for intervention based on the decades-long work of Mark Ylvisaker and Tim Feeney, which is founded on the positive principles of assessment and treatment and is implemented in a context-sensitive manner that integrates cognitive and behavioral intervention themes and focuses on the development of self-regulation. So here we have the pillars of the Cheers clinical model. So these pillars are the underpinnings of our approach and theories and values that guide our service with people who've sustained an acquired brain injury. So the first pillar we see is client and family-centered service. So on this pillar we see guiding principles and values including respect for the individual, dignity, choice, collaboration, and everyday ethics. Next we see neurocognitive rehabilitation. So within this pillar there is the brain and behavior relationships, cognitive compensation, the use of cognitive compensation, developing and maintaining metacognitive routines with clients, and errorless learning, which is a behavioral concept where someone is taught in a way that they avoid an aversive experience, and often the teachings are led by the environment. The next pillar we have is the neurobehavioral intervention. So in this pillar we have the principles of applied behavioral analysis, motivational interviewing, which is the therapy where you develop a empathetic approach and develop a shared view with someone while moving them towards change. We also have cognitive behavioral interventions, so looking at the interactions of cognition and behavior, mindfulness, neuropsychiatry, and positive psychology, which is a strengths-based positive supports type of psychology. And the functional supports that you'll often see in everyday use or everyday work includes collaborative everyday routines, supported participation, so this is community engagement for our clients, environmental supports, so we'll hear a lot about antecedent management and how it's effective with working with people with acquired brain injury, and also CTEC, so that is our cognitive compensation technology program.
So we're going to talk a bit about identity, and in the in-person training we would start off with a little exercise where we would get you to talk to the person next to you, maybe as if you've never met them before. Just keep a conversation going for 5 minutes and make notes about the person's behavior. And then we also let them know you're going to present on your partner in like 5 minutes. So when the 5 minutes is up, we let everyone know that you can't talk about their family, their job, their friends, their partner, their pets, their home, their car. You can only make behavioral observations. So usually people would say, you know, they were tapping their pen, they were twirling their hair, and basically we do this exercise because oftentimes we reduce our clients to their behaviors without seeing the bigger picture. So identity or sense of self is often shattered by the effects of ABI. Therefore, effective reconstruction of organized, compelling, and reasonably realistic identity is important to our clients post-injury.
So I want you to think of an example of someone, a client, if you ever had a client come into service or a client transition to a different aspect of our services, or if you've heard the history of someone transitioning into service with CHEERS. Likely if you've read the client abstracts in history, you will be well versed in clients coming into service. So what we often see or come across are clients in the community in a setting where they are more crisis prone. And so when our supports come in, our main goal is engagement, developing a therapeutic alliance with the client. We'll talk a bit more about that later. And supporting the client to get towards stability, whether that be connecting them with neuropsychiatry or housing, or even tweaking an aspect of their ADL routine. We're always working towards stability with the client, because then we know once they reach that stability that they are able to access they're able to engage in the community more and have a more meaningful existence. So we have the example of a client from Aldebrain, and this client, when he came to us, when he came to the top of our wait list and was referred to our neurobehavioral intervention program, the client was very crisis prone, was having repeated trips to the emergency room, and was also, this client was in a behavioral pattern of calling emergency services for instances that he would often confabulate, so things based on reality, but he the information he received, he would extrapolate on it, and it would become out of control. So the first thing was to connect with the family to get all the background information, and then to connect this client to neuropsychiatry, and then to get him the support he needed, and eventually to have him settle into one of our residences. So what we know about clients coming into service or serving people with brain injuries is that the effectiveness of being flexible in our approach to strategy development and embracing the notion that there's always going to be ambiguity and uncertainty in how we proceed at times. So if we're looking at this anatomy of a helping relationship, what builds a therapeutic reliance with ourselves and clients, we can see that, first of all, it's on a continuum. So we know it often goes back and forth, but we're steadily building trust with a client. So often these people that have come into service or that we see now have had several support workers in their lives. And so what's to say that they're going to trust you to support them and to help them find more meaning in their lives? So at the beginning of this helping relationship, we have here this therapeutic alliance. So that's getting on board with someone, and meeting them where they're at and building trust and respect. And what we know from working with folks with acquired brain injury is that it is easier said than done, and often it takes a longer time to build this trust and respect than we would anticipate. So working within the perspective that we're going to have incremental gains and it's going to be slow to warm up is important. But once we build that therapeutic alliance with a client, something I refer to as having money in the bank, then we can collaborate with the client. So this is the ongoing communication, the planning, the problem solving, and the mentoring of positive behavior to the clients. And then once this collaboration has taken place, then we see the options building. We see that we can explore the domains of interest with the clients and have them engage in meaningful activities and meet their personal goals.
So take a second to reflect on your role with your clients. What values and goals do you bring to your daily work? What attracted you to this line of work? What's the difference between your role working with a client in the community and your role working with a client in the residence? Just take a second and reflect on your role with your clients. So the role of the staff member is to help the client create meaning in their lives. Meaning is hopeful, meaning is positive. Meaning requires us to believe and communicate our hopefulness and to remember there's always something that works. So sometimes different staff members have different roles, but we're all guided by the same principles.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the real meat of what we're talking about. The information that follows is based on the 9 principles of intervention developed by Mark Ilvasacker and Tim Fede. And this framework is here to provide support workers a framework of behavioral intervention that can be integrated into our daily work and is reflective of what is currently understood as best practice in supporting individuals with acquired brain injuries. The framework for these principles is non-disability oriented and context sensitive, focusing on the involvement of the individual with brain injury in the development of positive supports and strategies. These principles also provide a structure for assessment and intervention that requires flexibility in strategy development to ensure that plans focus on activities that are meaningful to the person with an acquired brain injury and are useful in the context in which individuals will ultimately find themselves. These principles ask that the support staff adopt an attitude of hopefulness. I know we experience significant challenges in the work we do. A hopefulness and a willingness. And to paraphrase Mark Ilvasacker, it's the responsibility of all people working with individuals with acquired brain injury to help them create meaning in their lives. Meaning is hopeful, meaning is positive, and meaning requires us to believe and to communicate our hopefulness and to remember there's always something that works.
Principle 1. The person is the core of all interventions. So here at Cheers, we use person-centered services. So goals, procedures to achieve goals, the nature of supports, they're all individualized because no two individuals are alike. We need to take into consideration pre-injury characteristics, coping behaviors, and the injuries themselves because they all lead to different cognitive and behavioral impairments. So programs should determine the individual's reflective desires and choices versus their immediate impulses. So there's a client at the Finch residence who absolutely hates to shower. His immediate impulse is absolutely not, I will not shower today. But we know that his reflective desire is to be a presentable, clean guy because he's sociable, he has a ton of friends. So we negotiate with our clients the supports that they need. They're a part of the process. It's collaborative. So for example, there's 2 different shower routines as you can see on the screen. There's Danny and there's Ken. They both have very different showering routines. Danny needs a checklist, he needs lots of praise. He doesn't like doing it, so he needs some motivation. He needs some staff set up, so we start the shower for him. Ken is a little bit different. He's motivated to shower. He likes to shower. It's more of a safety issue in the shower. If you left him in there, he would probably be in there all day because he loves it. So just thinking about these 2 clients, what would happen if we swapped their supports for a day? What kind of things would happen? Think about your own clients. Pick 2 clients that you have and imagine swapping their supports for the day. What do you think would happen?
Principle 2 is that interventions are organized around personally relevant activities. So I want you guys to think about something that you enjoyed doing, it gave you a great sense of purpose and meaning, but that you haven't done in a really long time. And I want you to reflect on what are the barriers or what keeps you from doing this activity. And also, if you were to create a personal plan to get back to this activity, what would that plan entail? What steps would you need to take to get back to that activity? We know that our clients often don't have work or go to school, and they are often socially isolated with the social friend network being minimized. Our goal is to help them reestablish purpose and meaning by helping them re-identify their strengths, abilities, values, interests, and to be able to use their personal strengths and personality in contexts that bring them meaning. And we know what happens is that often interest and personality can change post-injury. What we also know is that in the absence of meaningful engagement in life activities, all interventions will fail. Support must have systematic procedures in place where we explore an individual's domains of interest and meaning, and look for opportunities to expand those domains if they're narrow. So I think of an example of a client we have in one of our residences, and pre-injury he was a carpenter, and he always talks with great enthusiasm about his work that he's done in carpentry in the past. So I know an opportunity was presented to him looking at what his current abilities are, where he was given the opportunity to work with wood, not heavy machinery or anything, but he was able to be supported in sanding and painting of a wood project that he was able to have on display at Shears, which brought him great pride. It was also a prompt for his memory to remind him of the work he was able to accomplish at Shears, and also it was a social connector in that he was able to talk with others about the work he'd done.
Principle 3, contextual supports are critical to success. So skills are more likely to be learned when taught in the environment that they're used to. So for example, if you're teaching a client to cook, it's more useful to teach them that skill in their home kitchen versus the club kitchen, for example. So generalizing an ABI, it can be difficult to transfer from one context to another. And we see this problem with our clinical groups that we offer here at Cheers. So we have, a social skills group or a positive psychology group. They're learning these skills in a group setting, in a classroom, and it's really difficult for them to translate these skills to their home environments. Skills are more likely to be learned when the worker is also engaged in the process, so you can't expect someone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. So staff should model and participate in the intervention to get their clients involved as well. So how would you engage your clients in the following supports? So something like banking or cooking, shopping, medical appointments, personal care, orientation. How could you participate with them to get them also engaged? Principle 4, reduction of support is part of the plan. So we enable our clients to succeed with natural supports, so with their friends, their families, using environmental cues. And we use multiple steps before we get to the target behavior. So we can break down the support into multiple steps. And then we use a systematic reduction of support over time. So we kind of fade out our support to give our clients more independence. And then we use frequent and ongoing adjustment, because there might be some days where the client maybe needs a bit more support, and some days where the client maybe is having a really good day and doesn't need our support as much. So we're always kind of meeting our clients where they're at. So for example, there's a client in the Fringe residence. We actually started doing data entry with him, so it was kind of new for the client and for the staff. And at first we were heavily doing it together. We were both learning. After a while he got really good at it, so I was really able to fade my support. He still needs a few prompts here and there, so it's not like I can fade my support completely. And there's some days where he needs more prompts, some days where he doesn't need as many prompts. But that's an example of building a support with the client and kind of fading out our support, but still kind of meeting the client where they're at. Okay, so we're going to do an origami activity right now. So I'm going to get you to grab a regular piece of paper. If you can, grab a recycled piece of paper so that we don't waste too much. And you're going to watch the video below and follow along step by step as best as you can. It might seem like I'm going really fast, but I don't want you to stop or pause the video. I just want you to do as best as you can to follow along with my instructions. And then we'll talk about it after. Okay, good luck. So
it's difficult to have a discussion about this in an online training, but I want you to reflect for yourself. Was that difficult? Did you get frustrated? What was that like for you? And then we're going to actually do it again. And you're going to watch a similar but a little bit different video. We're going to make the same thing, a paper boat, but this time I am going to really take my time and make sure that you guys understand each step of the process and that you can follow along with me. So it's going to be a little bit more relaxed, hopefully it won't be as stressful. So I want you to take a second and just reflect on your experience this time. How was it different from the first experience? Obviously this is your second time making the boat, so maybe it was a bit more familiar, but did you find it less frustrating with the amount of time I gave you? Maybe did you find it a little irritating if I gave you a bit too much time for a certain step? So it's really important to, when we're working with our clients, it's really important to give steps slowly, one at a time, use concise statements, and model the step if you can. It's also really important to meet the client where they're at. So in this activity, obviously it's really difficult in an online training. I can't see you, you're not in front of me. I can't gauge whether you're struggling with a particular step. Maybe give you a bit more time or give you a prompt. You can't ask me questions in the moment, so that's a little bit difficult. But when we're working with our clients, we can absolutely gauge how they're doing with a particular step and give them those prompts, give them that extra time. And if they're excelling in a certain step, then we can move forward. So the purpose of this activity is just to really demonstrate Principle 4. So reduction of support is part of the plan. So I mean, if we were going to do this again, I would get you to try it maybe on your own. I would eventually fade out my steps to make the boat. So we're really setting up our clients for success, and we're also using errorless learning. So we want to avoid any aversive feeling that would deter the client from wanting to try this again or wanting to move forward and reach the target behavior.
Principle 5. Positive everyday routines are in the context of pursuing meaningful goals. Clients with ABI have several executive functioning difficulties, which make decision-making in the moment, good judgment, controlling their impulses, and cognitive flexibility difficult. Even subtle changes in routine can disrupt their behavior and create a sense of loss of control. As such, we should strive to maintain regular routines, or at minimum inform clients of changes in routine well in advance. Routines are collaborative, so when clients come into our service, we're not fitting them into our framework. Rather, we arrange our schedules to accommodate them. For example, if we had a client coming into our residential service and we needed to make a hygiene schedule, we would ask them if they preferred to shower in the morning or the evening. Maintenance of these routines should also be celebrated. Sometimes, though, there are things that we can't control, like the weather. So we've had recreational programs canceled because of too much snow, then you have to cancel Wheel-Trans or cancel a doctor's appointment, and sometimes clients can get upset and it can even result in an outburst. Sometimes the best thing to do in this situation is just to empathize with them. Wow, it really sucks. I know having your day canceled, especially last minute, really, really sucks. And then after they calm down, you can make a new plan with them. Can you think of a time when this has happened with one of your clients?
Principle 6. Assessment of the intervention is ongoing and context sensitive. So in brain injury outcomes, we know that the frontal lobe is often injured, and this results in organizational impairments and challenges in thinking and daily living. Under these conditions, individuals living with the effects of acquired brain injury, we want to have these clients receive services within integrated systems of support across everyday contexts. So we're looking at clients and we're working with clients in their home setting, in recreational setting, in different clinical activities. And we know how many clients we see in a day, but it's good to reflect on how many support staff clients see in a day or even in their lifetime. So we need to be continually evaluating clients for effectiveness in supports and also for changes in ability. This is very important because clients change day to day, and often they will have insights on what these changes are, and this is where the collaboration piece comes in, that when we are always assessing clients, looking for different changes in their abilities, be they improvements or decline, we're always working with the clients to adjust supports to those abilities.
Principle 7. Feedback must be in context, sensitive, and meaningful. So there are going to be times when we have to provide feedback to our clients, and sometimes providing feedback can be difficult. But there's some strategies that we can use to make it less difficult. So we can ask if we can offer a suggestion to the client. You can be selective in your feedback, maybe pick the most important thing and give the rationale for that. Speak in terms the client understands, so maybe using concise language. Be respectful, non-judgmental, avoid sarcasm, and then collaborate on how to move forward and find solutions. So sometimes the negative behavior can serve a purpose, whether it's accessing something or escaping an activity. And so sometimes we just need to teach a positive way to communicate the same message. For example, I need a break. Can you think of a time when you've given feedback to your client and maybe it hasn't gone so well? What could you do differently? So this is just a chart that kind of summarizes everything that Dr. Martin Seligman was just talking about in the video that you just watched. So again, it's really important to be mindful of the way we communicate with people, verbally and non-verbally, especially in the way we provide feedback. So again, only active constructive responding builds relationships.
Principle 8 is that behavioral supports must be positive and proactive. When we say the word positive, we don't specifically mean cheerleading, but doing it with a friendly smile is always helpful. This is the idea. The idea of positive is that it's context sensitive and that it's collaborative, well established with the client, and that it moves them towards positive change. When we talk about proactive, we talk about setting up the environment so that the client or individual living with acquired brain injury can have success. So we'll look at a few theories that are elaborated by Ilbasacker and Feeney, and the first one is antecedent management. So antecedent management is the idea that you are setting up the environment to provide cues and information that will guide a client to change or success. So an example I have is that we had a client who was ataxic, so he had some mobility issues. He used a walker, and one of his goals was to participate in a swim program. So we had a staff go to the client's house to pick them up to bring them to the pool, and part of the procedure was to pack up the walker with the client. But the client was really resistant to having the walker with him because his sense of identity and limited insight told him that he didn't have any mobility issues and that he could walk freely on a pool deck and access a swimming pool without the use of a walker. So what we did was, the intervention was to set up the environment. So we would have the client at the pool, and they would change to come to the program, and as they walked out of the change room, they would see the walker in front of them, and as it was part of the environment, the client more easily learned that the walker was put there and he would just use it to walk on the pool deck. The second theory and framework of intervention I'm going to talk about is errorless learning. So this is the idea of supporting a client to learn a new task or skill and having the client avoid an aversive in the process of learning the skill, so that they are more likely to have success. And support is faded throughout the procedure. So a classic example we have is a program that we have been doing at Cheers called Memory Link, where we support a client to use a smart device to enter appointments and reminders in a calendar. How the support is faded is that first the support staff will fully model the task and then gradually reduce the support so that they may give a verbal prompt to the client to complete a step in the task, like say something like press the square button, enter the time, and then that will be faded to just giving a physical prompt like pointing to the button that needs to be pushed on the device. And how this is an effective approach, and you will learn this in other trainings, is that the client their support is scaffolded while they're learning the task, so they never experience an error. So they never experience that gut feeling or response that, oh, I failed, I did something wrong. The third principle that I'm going to talk about is something called positive behavioral momentum. This one is the idea that when we're looking at the whole person and perhaps they have a complex or challenging behavior, that there's something within that behavior that can be reinforced positively and that can support therapeutic alliance and also support the reduction in the problematic behavior. So a classic example is the one where there's someone in a classroom or some kind of setting, and they're sitting down and they are supposed to be being attentive and listening, and they throw something on the ground, like they'll throw a piece of paper or pencil. To provide positive behavioral momentum support in that moment, the practitioner support staff would say to the person, "Why, thank you for staying in your seat." So there's always a feature of the behavior that can receive validation or praise, and then it's evidence-based that building on that validation and praise can help reduce the problematic behavior. So in terms of positive, proactive support, we know for ourselves, hopefully in most cases, we're able to self-regulate. So there's often an internal voice within us that is supporting us to self-regulate. But often that isn't intact in folks who are survivors of brain injury. So when we talk about antecedent management or environmental supports, we have to consider ourselves, the support staff, as part of the environment. So here's an example from Ilvisacker and Feeney of a script to support self-regulation. So this is what you would hear, the sentence, "Let's think about this. We can figure it out, how to make this work." But when we break down the components of this statement, we can look at the phrase, "let's think." So thinking is a process where we often need to take pause. So this will help support an individual with acquired brain injury block the impulsive response. Let's think about this. We can figure out. When we talk about we, this is the collaboration piece, the working together. It is making the client feel at ease and not that they're performing for us. Let's figure this out. So there's a problem, but collaboratively we can examine this problem and develop steps or process to solve the problem, to make it work. The idea ultimately, as we've been talking about throughout this training, is for individuals to achieve fulfillment and meaning and ultimately achieve their personal goals.
Principle 9. The ultimate goal is finding meaning in life after brain injury. ABI clients had meaning and purpose in their life before their ABI, and now they have to rediscover themselves, as some of their strengths, abilities, and resources may have changed since their injury. Meaningful activities can be related to work, school, family, friends, or recreation. However, it's common for those with significantly altered profiles of ability after the injury to lack meaningful and engaging activities in these domains. They may be unable to work or attend school. They may have lost most of their friends, possibly even family ties. They may be unable to engage in recreational activities favored before the injury. Social isolation and inactivity seems to be especially true for those with TBI and substance abuse and/or mental illness. There are many clients at Cheers who've had to rediscover their purpose or had to get meaning in their lives. Can you think of any of your clients that have had to do this?
When we talk about the overall quality of life of an individual who survived an acquired brain injury that we're working with, we're talking about the focus of intervention. That's our focus, to improve their overall quality of life through using collaborative approaches that are context sensitive to promote self-regulation so that clients gain greater access to the larger world and are able to make social connections and to participate in community and activities that bring meaning to their life. So a guiding assumption is that when an individual's needs are effectively met, when they're competently engaged in an array of meaningful activities over which they have adequate control, when they have meaningful social relationships and quality of life is correspondingly enhanced, problem behaviors substantially decrease in the absence of targeted interventions.
The Cheers Mentors are a group of clients who have the interests and skill to take on a leadership and teaching role within the Cheers community. The Mentor Program, which started in 2003 with 4 mentors, now has 36 members. The mentors do a variety of tasks in the Cheers community. These include running the club, helping with ADS programs, facilitating their own programs, organizing outings, leading special events, and partnering with other organizations, as well as helping where they are needed. The Mentor Program promotes teamwork, empowers clients, and maximizes resources for our organization.
It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of work, but I love work, so I thoroughly enjoy it. And I love taking care of the clients and helping them out.
Well, Lorraine, I work with her on Thursdays. At first we weren't very close, but now we work together and I feel great. We're like sisters. I love her very much.
Mentor makes me feel better because it's to show that you have more responsibility and you're there to help people. And you're going a step up from just coming into the club and mentors helping you or staff helping you. You do it yourself.
And I feel I'm giving back to the community and Cheers in my own way. Because the mentors are former clients or clients, and they know what clients want.
Well, I have to say, it's given me a lot of, like a self-esteem boost, you know, being able to come in here and help out, and, you know, it's like going to a job, you know, you go and you do your responsibilities and make sure you do them well, and I think I do.
Mentoring is great because I can use the cash register and I get to talk to more people.
There are people of varying abilities here at Cheers, and some of the mentors are generally a little more higher functioning and can help out with people who aren't really sure or just getting used to the Cheers way of doing things. And personally, it gives me more of a feeling of self-satisfaction